Hey everyone, and welcome to the first video on my new YouTube channel, Lorcana Doctor. On this channel, we'll be covering everything Disney Lorcana, from deck guides, draft guides, tournament results, and we'll even be going over spoilers for upcoming sets in the coming months. I have a lot of experience with competitive card games, stemming back 20 years, starting with Pokemon, and then spending many years playing Magic the Gathering. I wanted to bring some of that experience that I've built up over these years and share it with you, and see how it can benefit us all moving into Disney Lorcana. On today's video, I really wanted to go through a general approach of how to kind of evaluate cards. When you open up a pack for the first time, if you're looking at making a constructed deck that you're going to bring to your local game store, if you're just doing kind of a friendly games with your friends across the table and you just want to figure out what cards are good or what cards are bad, or if you're going to be doing a draft of Disney Lorcana and on the fly you're trying to figure out what card is right for my deck, this is kind of that general approach. What cards are good, what cards aren't good, what's making the cut. And so we're going to be going through that. I'm also going to spend some time going over some of the major keywords in the set, those keywords that you're going to see on card and card again, and kind of a general feel for how you should be evaluating these, because that obviously changes the cards and if they're good or not. In the coming days, I'm going to be doing full set reviews for all the color combos, all the colors, and just kind of grading the cards. So that way you can get my input on if I think a card is strong or weak, kind of in the constructed, if you're doing a combo deck, or if you're looking at draft. So without further ado, let's get started. So I think the first kind of major point to take a look at when you're taking a look at a card, let's take a look at the first card here, Stitch. It's kind of seeing what a basic power level is. In a lot of these card games, you'll see for a certain casting cost or a certain ink cost, the developers often make a baseline across the colors, and it gives it that much power. So the prime example here is if we take a look at Stitch, you have a 1 ink cost creature here that has 2 power and 2 toughness and 1 lore. And this is something you'll see, this is kind of the standard, and everything is built off of this. So this is what 1 power should be giving you. And it's also important to note with Disney Lorcana, one of the cool ideas is that it makes it a bit more complex, because this is what 1 inkable casting cost should be giving you. So for 1 inkable cast, you should get a 2/2 with 1 lore on adventuring. And we can see this across the colors. So you see here, again, you've got a 1 inkable casting cost, 2/2, 1 lore. So it doesn't really matter what color you're in. This is the base of what you should be expecting for 1 casting cost. Then we have to figure out how do we evaluate cards that deviate from this casting cost, right? So here we got, again, 1 casting cost that's inkable, so dealing with the same, and we have a 1/2, 1 power, 2 toughness with 1 lore. So essentially the same, except we're down a power. And so what do you gain losing that power here? Here they're giving you the support keyword. So what this keyword does is that whenever this character quests, you may add their power to another chosen character for this turn. So the idea is here, this card, you want to be questing with it. Every turn you exert it or tap it. You still get your lore counter, but you get to make your other 2/2 into a 3/2 and maybe get a more favorable trade. And so when looking at these kind of casting costs, this is what you need to make the decision on, and this is what you need to figure out what the baseline is. And this is something I do across each level. So what does a 1 inkable casting cost get you versus a 2 versus a 3? And obviously as you go up, you should be getting more power, more toughness, better keywords, better abilities, or more lore, any combination. And obviously, depending on what deck you're playing, some of these you're willing to sacrifice. If you're just a deck that's rushing lore, rushing to 20, you might not worry about power at all, right? You're not going to be challenging at all. So a creature with 0 power and 6 toughness, that's really hard to take out with 3 lore on quest. I mean, that's fantastic. And so these are the things you need to decide for your deck, what you want, but this is kind of a general approach. Okay guys, so moving forward here, we have a new card, Maleficent. So for a 1 non-inkable creature, we get a 1 power, 1 toughness, 2 lore. So obviously we see a bit of a difference here, right? We're used for a 1 casting cost, we should be getting a 2/2 with 1 lore. Here we're getting a 1/1 with 2 lore, and the other trade-off is that this card is not inkable. So obviously it's a bit of a downside. It seems like the creators at Disney and the playtesters thought this is quite a powerful card. They gave it a rare rarity, and so this is something they don't want running rampant across the colors, and for good reason. I mean, this gets you 10% of the way there. If you're dropping this on turn 1, on turn 2 you're questing for 2. If they don't have a 1-drop, you're getting 4 lore on turn 3. And then finally on turn 4, they're probably responding after their creature comes out of their ink drying. And so you're potentially getting 6 lore out of creature here. And or drawing out a removal spell, like Fire the Cannons, where you're drawing out a premium removal spell early on for a 1 casting cost creature. So this is one of those areas where it might look like a poorer card, right? You can't ink it, so that's kind of a downfall. It's only a 1/1 compared to the 2/2s you're getting, but really lore is at a premium. Oftentimes you'll see as you go through the cards, and as I go through my card ratings, it's pretty easy to get a 7 power, 5 toughness creature, but it's quite rare to get those creatures pumping out 2, 3, 4 lore. And so lore comes at a premium, and so this is a card that's actually a probably pretty good card, even though there's a lot of downsides here. Moving forward, here's another example of, again, a 1 inked creature, 1 casting cost creature that is inkable. And here it's just a bit of a deviation. So instead of getting a 2/2, you get a 1/3, and it still quests for 1 lore. This is one of those ones that if you're going up against a 2/2 and they're looking to be aggressive and you're just looking to get your lore out, this is a great card because essentially they have to attack into you twice. So if they're attacking into you twice, they're not getting lore those 2 times, so that's a 2 lore swing on your end because that's 2 lore they didn't get. You're guaranteed to get 2 quests off with this, so that's 2 lore you did get. And then in the end, your net 4 lore, 0 to 2. If you had a 2/2 here, you would get 1 lore, and then they would take it out. And so it'd be a 2 net, right? They didn't quest, and they finish off your creature. And so this might be something you take a look into to try to figure out an archetype, is that you could take a look at these early cards and say, well, for purple here, or amethyst, is it an aggressive deck, right? We've already seen, if we go back to the previous card, we've already seen a 1-drop that's questing for 2, which is obviously very strong. And then we have another built card, that a 1-drop again, that's inkable, that's questing for 1, but you're likely getting at minimum 2 quests off. I'm not saying that's what Amethyst does, but these are the things you look at when trying to build your deck. Do you want to be hyper aggressive, trying to get every creature you're playing can quest multiple times before they're challenged and banished, or that every creature you have might get banished on the first challenge, but they're getting you a bunch of lore? And so there's different ways to building a deck here. Moving forward, next we're going to compare 2 removal spells that are very similar, and one's very, very good, and one is very, very bad. And the difference is what colors are they in. And as you move forward across this card game or any other card games you might play, you'll find that different colors have different identities. One color might be very aggressive. One color might be focused on healing or drawing cards. One color might be really good at removing your opponent's creatures. One color you might have to pay more ink, or there might be more restrictions on cards that remove opponent's creatures. And so here we have a card in steel that's Fire the Cannons. Plays it as an action, and so one ink or 1 casting cost here, and it's just deal 2 damage to any creature. I mean, this is fantastic. If they have a 2/2 or a 3/2, or as we saw the Maleficent, that's a 1/1 getting 2 lore. Here you can just go 1 for 1 for these cards. You use this card, you banish their card. That's fantastic. Taking a look at the next card, however, same thing, same casting cost. So you'd think, oh, this is pretty equivocal or comparable rather. And then still deal 2 damage to chosen character, and you say, okay, this seems the same, except this is to chosen damaged character, which makes this much, much worse. If you haven't damaged their character, you can't even play this card. This is infinitely worse than the previous card. I don't even think I'd play this in my deck, whereas if I was playing a steel deck, I think I'd be hard-pressed not to be playing Fire the Cannons. What could make this card better? I mean, you could argue that green shouldn't have as good removal, or emerald rather. If this was inkable, it might be playable. If this was coming down in inkable and you hadn't damaged one of their creatures, at least you could get an ink out of it. But if this is just sitting in your hand dead, if they have a 3/2 evasive that gets 2 lore every turn and you don't have an evasive creature, you can't even deal with it with this because you can never get damage on them. This just isn't a very good card overall. And these little stipulations are what really separates the cards, and these are where it can be you can kind of be easily fooled into thinking your card's good when it's not. Next is kind of comparing the high end of things. We're not going to go through every card. Like I said, I'm going to be doing a set review of each color and combination, and going through all the cards and grading the cards and giving those grades to you so you can use them building your decks. But kind of the basis of all this is you can imagine a card that's 1 casting cost, and the card says you win the game. That's obviously the best card you could have. If you take that same card and you make it 20 casting costs, and the card says you win the game. Well, I mean, for 20, how often are Disney Lorcana games going up to 20 ink? Not very often. And so that's probably an unplayable card. And so you have a card that literally says you play the game, and depending on its casting costs, it might be playable, it might not. And so we take a look here. This is obviously a high casting cost card, the highest in the entire game so far. And so it's 9 and inkable. One important thing to note is when you get up to these high casting cost cards, it's very important that they are inkable. If you have 4 of this card in your deck and you draw 2 or 3 of them throughout your hand, you're never going to cast 3 of these in one game. The game's easily going to be over before that. So it's important that you're being able to play these as ink. Whereas if this was 9 casting costs and uninkable, it'd be much, much, much worse. The same isn't true for something like the Fire the Cannons. The 1 casting cost, deal 2 damage to any creature, because you're always going to be able to play that and get that out of your hand. Whereas if this was not inkable, you're going to be stuck with this in your hand for a long, long time. So it passes the test. It's a high casting cost, and at least it's inkable. So we kind of move forward. It's 7/5. I mean, that's pretty good. Although there are much lower casting costs that are going to be able to deal with this and deal 5 damage on the challenge or whatnot. And so you might get traded there. This is the key on high casting cost creatures. When they come down, if it's a creature, not an action or a spell that wipes the board or something, if it's a creature, even if they deal with it immediately, you have to have come out ahead. And so let's imagine your opponent has a card called Dragonfire, which is 5 casting costs and it's just banished creature. So you play this down on your turn, right? And so this ability is Dragonfire. When you play this character, you may banish chosen opposing character. You automatically get rid of their best character on the board. If they happen to have a premium removal spell, they then play a second card to get rid of this card. So right out the gates, even though your card never got to quest, never got to challenge, you're already ahead of card. So worst case scenario, you got rid of 2 of their cards for your 1. Best case scenario, this comes down, you get rid of their best card, you challenge in to their next best card the next turn. They're out 2 cards. You have to pay a 3rd card or challenge into this to finish it off. Out 3 cards or 4 cards. That's what you're looking at the high end. And the other thing is if they only have like 1 really big threat that you're able to deal with, then you're able to start questing with this card. So this checks all the boxes. If you're able to play a deck that gets up to 9 ink that you're able to ramp to, this is obviously a great card. In comparison, however, we take a look at something like Taka. So step 1, we take a look at casting cost 6. 6 is pretty high, not as high as 9. And you take a look at this, the power and toughness. It's stronger than the card we just saw for less casting cost. So you go, oh, maybe this card's better. First, it's not inkable. So this might just be stuck in your hand until you get 6 ink. That could be turn 8. That could be turn 9. This could just be a dead card in your hand. If you're drawing multiple of these cards and you're not getting ink on the field, these are dead cards. So this is what I talked about earlier, is that high casting cost cards typically need to be inkable, unless you really have a deck that's good at getting ink out. The second part of this is the Reckless. The Reckless really hurts this card. So let's play worst case scenario. You play this card. It doesn't banish anything, like the card we just saw. You pass the turn, because you can't do anything, and the ink is drying, and then they use the Dragon's Fire, Dragon Breath on it. Banish your creature. You just went 1 for 1 in terms of cards. Your big 6-drop did nothing, did not impact the board. You're a turn behind. That's an awful feeling. If they don't have that answer, all you can do is challenge. You better hope they don't have evasive creatures. You better hope they don't have creatures that when they're banished, the opposing character gets banished, or when challenged, you draw a card. All these things will make this card infinitely worse. And then if you're at 19 lore, this character doesn't really get you any closer to winning the game. This card can stabilize the board, but this is an example of a card that's pretty similar to the last card we saw, right? Stronger, more power, more toughness, and it's just way, way worse. And so that's one thing to consider when looking at the high end of cards. I want to take some time and go through some of the keywords with everyone so you kind of have an idea of what can I be doing with this keyword, how should I be looking at it, how should I be evaluating these, and obviously, like I said, I'll evaluate them all with actual grades over the coming days and weeks here. But the first keyword we have is singer. And so singer comes with a number after it, singer 3, singer 4, singer 5. And the idea is behind all of these is when you have a song in your deck or a card song in your deck, you're able to cast these by tapping a creature instead of paying the ink cost or the converted cost here. So for example, typically if you have a song that takes 5 to cast, you would have to have a 5 ink creature to tap to cast that song if you're not going to pay for it. In this example, Ariel on kind of theme as the spectacular singer, she's able to sing songs at a power of 5 even though she's 3. So someone with singer, it lets you ramp out some mana. So on turn you play her on turn 3, on turn 4 you can pay a 5 song. So it can help you ramp. It can also help you when you can play multiple plays. If you have 2 5-drops, say on turn 4, you can sing with Ariel, do the 5 song, and also then do a 4 converted mana cost or converted ink cost creature, and kind of do 2 plays in one. So this is a way to get free casting costs on things. And so it can be quite powerful, and there certainly are quite a few combos that you can do here. Up next, we have the bodyguard mechanic, and I've seen some confusion on how this actually reads. So there's 2 kind of sentences or 2 statements here, and they read separately. So any character with bodyguard is always a bodyguard, and that's important to note. Now, when you play a character with bodyguard, you may choose to exert them when they come into play. So you can have them tapped or turned to the side or exerted when they first come out. Now, so that's statement 1. Now, statement 2 is there all the time. And so any opposing character, if you have a bodyguard exerted, if they're going to challenge, they have to challenge the bodyguard. I have seen confusion from multiple people, both in person and online, thinking that the bodyguard effect only lasts the turn that this creature comes down. That's not true. It's just that you can exert it the turn it comes down. So you don't really have to worry about the summoning sickness or the ink drying in that regard. So how do you look at bodyguards? Well, the idea is if you have a bunch of low casting cost creatures that you want to be adventuring with or turning sideways or tapping to get their abilities off, but they're pretty flimsy, you can play one of these cards that makes it hard to attack into them. So you can keep using the abilities. You can get an extra round of, if you have like 3 or 4 creatures all with 1 lore gain, you tap them all, you get 4 lore, say from 1 from each of the 4 of them. You play the bodyguard creature, they challenge and get rid of it. The next turn you get another 4 lore, and then you can kind of get ahead that way. So it's a pretty cool mechanic and pretty good. Next we have the shift mechanic. And so any shift mechanic, what you'll see, it'll say shift with a number. And what this means is that you can play this on top of a card with the same name. So you might have a Hades that costs 2 or 3 to get out. And so instead of playing 8 here, you could play 6, which is the shift cost, and then put this card on top of the other card. Some important things to note when looking at shift. One is that if the creature if you played, let's say there's a Hades with 2 casting costs, you played that last turn on turn 5, and then on turn 6 you shift and pay 6 to get this out. This Hades will have haste, or you can use it that turn and tap it that turn, or explore with it that turn, or adventure, which is quite good, right? If you look at this ability here, it's Sinister Plot. This character gets +1 for each other villain character you have in play. If you've got like 3 other villain characters, you drop this down, he's getting 4 lore, and he can swing that turn to get the 4 lore. That's really big. So one is oftentimes these creatures will have the ability to do something the turn they come out, which is excellent, or they could challenge. He's 6/7, he can challenge and get rid of one of their best creatures the turn he comes out. So that's excellent if you played on something that's already been out for a turn. The downsides here is that if they get a removal spell and remove your creature, banish your creature, you lose both creatures, right? So this is kind of what we call like a 2-for-1. If they play Dragon's Breath or Dragon's Fire and banish this, you lose the initial Hades as well as this Hades. So you kind of they only use 1 card and they got rid of 2 of yours. So that's a bit of a downside. A unique thing that happens here that you don't really see in Magic so much is that actually if you bounce these creatures, like if you bounce this creature or return to hand mechanic, where an enemy puts a return to hand mechanic or return to deck mechanic, both cards go up to your hand, which is important to know. So how to do shift? If you're going to be shifting something, there should be a pretty big payoff. You should be able to do something with it that turn. Otherwise, you risk getting a 2-for-1 or getting set back with a bounce to hand where you lose both creatures back to your hands and you have to play them both again, which can really slow you down. But if you can come out and you can swing and take out their best creature, or if you have 3 or 4 villains and you're getting +4 lore and you're getting 5 lore on the turn it comes out, along with all your other villains' lore, I mean that's like a 9-10 lore turn, which is excellent. So obviously this can be very strong. Next we have Challenger, and so Challenger again will come with a positive number next to it, and so when you're challenging into someone, you'll get that much more power. One important thing to know is you don't get this power during any challenge, so this card isn't a 2-4 at all times, because if it was a 2-4 at all times, they would just make the card a 2-4, right? You wouldn't have to have the keyword. The idea is that if you're on defense and you're being challenged, you're 0-4, and if you're on the offense and you're challenging one of their creatures, you're 2-4. So any card with Challenger, the idea behind it is you should look and say, is this a card I want to be challenging with? If so, you're getting a big benefit. If not, if you're building a deck that you don't want to be challenging, this isn't a very good card, right? You're getting a 0-4 with 1 lore. But if you're looking to challenge a 2-4 for 2, you can take out 2 of their 1-drops, 2 of their 2/2s or whatnot, pretty easily. So this is kind of the way to evaluate that. So Challenger is certainly good if you're trying to get board stabilization and get rid of some of their best creatures. Next we have the keyword Rush, and so I think I've been calling this Haste, coming out with Haste. That's coming out with a Rush. And so a bit of a difference between some of the other card games, if a creature comes out with Rush or with Haste, it doesn't mean they can do anything that turn. It doesn't mean they can tap or they can go on an adventure to get lore. What Rush is that they come out and they can challenge the turn, so they can fight another creature that turn. So again, this is kind of evaluating this card. You have a 3/3, so it's going to be taking a lot of the 1/3s or the 2/2s or the 1/1s, and you can get multiple challenges off with that. And the turn it comes out is going to be able to do that. So you're going to be able to go at least 1-for-1, if not getting a 2-for-1 over a couple turns here. So Rush is always a benefit. There's never a downside to it. Next we have Ward. So Ward is opponents can't choose this character except to challenge. There's some pretty busted or broken combinations with this, especially with some items that can kind of untap your creatures. So the idea is that removal spells don't work on it. You can't tap it down. You can't target it with a creature spell or whatnot. And the only way to really get rid of this, unless you have like a board wipe where you're just getting rid of all the creatures that are non-specific, is to challenge this specifically. The nice thing about this is you look at this card, and then it's when this character is challenged and banished. You may also banish the challenging character, and so it's one of those things that you finally your enemy challenges this, and they get rid of their own creature that did it. So that's always a benefit to having Ward. The other thing is if you have a card that can untap this, you can explore or adventure, get your 3 lore, and then untap this card, and then they can't interact with it, right? The card's not exerted anymore, and so they can't challenge it. And so this is a way that if you have that combo, you can just get 3 lore turn after turn after turn, and there's no way they can deal with it unless they have a board wipe or they're able to destroy your item. So Ward, again, always upside. There's no downside to it. And in certain cards, it can be quite strong. Next keyword we're looking at is Evasive. Similar to the Ward keyword, this is only characters with Evasive can challenge this character. So it doesn't protect you against items or removal spells, but it does protect you against the majority of characters in terms of challenging. So this is a good way that you can just get in. You play a card like this, especially if it's a lower casting cost, 3 casting cost or 2 casting cost with Evasive, and you just get in turn after turn with 1 or 2 lore, and over the course of a game, that can add up quite a bit. And then on the flip side, having some evasives in your deck allow you to challenge their best evasive creatures. If you need to be on the defensive, and they have an evasive creature that is just ticking up their lore, and they're getting close to 20, this is the way to answer. So it's never a terrible idea, and probably recommended that if your deck can fit in to have a few evasive creatures in your deck, always a good idea. And finally, the last card that we're looking at, or sorry, the last keyword that we're looking at is Support. And so this is whenever this card quests or adventures and they're getting their lore, they can give their power to someone else. And so this is a really, at first I thought there was an underwhelming keyword, but I actually think it's a really good keyword. And so this is why, right? So you play this creature for 2, ink dries, whatever, summoning sickness comes off, and then you quest and you get your lore. Now, if they want to challenge into this creature, they're probably going to lose their creature as well, right? So you're going at least one for one, because this creature's got 3 power, which is excellent. However, on the turn you actually quest, before they have a chance to challenge it, you can make your 1/1 into a 4/1 and trade up. Or your 2/2, your 1 casting cost 2/2 is now a 5/2, and can hit that Maleficent Dragon that we were talking about. Right now, all of a sudden, your 1 casting cost 2/2 is taking out the 9-drop big dragon we saw. So this allows you to trade up with other creatures while still getting lore off this creature, while the creatures like this with high power who have support will likely go 1 for 1 on the trade when they do get challenged. So that's a good keyword overall. And so I hope that helps. I hope I've been able to share some of my experience with you guys on how to evaluate cards, both kind of in draft and going towards constructed. And if you pull a pack and you're just looking through it quickly and you're trying to figure out what card should I take for my deck, this is a good way just kind of figure out, put everything in perspective. Remember, always take casting costs into account. If it's a really high casting cost, it might not matter what the card says. And even a low casting cost, it might depend if it's inkable or not, and the comparables. So I hope this helps. If you like this video, please drop a like. Any questions, please drop them below. I'm happy to answer any questions you guys have in the comment section there. If you want to subscribe to the channel, that'd be fantastic. I'm going to be dropping out more videos over the coming days and weeks here. So stay tuned for those grading videos. I'll be working on some of the Ruby commons and uncommons and rares coming up here. I'll be releasing those soon, and then I'll be seeing everyone later. See you guys later.